If you go down in the woods today, you're sure of a big surprise. If you go down in the woods today, you'd better go in disguise. For every bear that ever there was will gather there for certain, because today's the day the teddy bears have their picnic.
By the time that record was made, on the 28th of September 1932, Henry Hall was an established star. To find out how he achieved that status, we must go back to the 2nd of May 1898, to Peckham, London, where Henry was born, one of the 5 children of Henry Hall Sr., a blacksmith turned grocer. Henry went to the LCC school in Waller Road. Both parents were members of the Salvation Army and keen on music. They wanted all of their children to play instruments, and for young Henry they chose a trumpet and later the piano. He won a scholarship to Trinity School of Music and worked in the evenings for his father, who was by now selling odd crockery. At 13, Henry won a first in the student teachers class, but when he left school in 1912, his first job was as a page boy in the National Health Insurance Commission. Not for long, however, because his father found him a post with the Salvation Army Music Department, who required
a young man with a theoretical and practical knowledge of music and some office experience.
Henry had acquired a modest knowledge of shorthand and typing, and so he got the job. By the time he was 17, he was playing second cornet in the International Staff Band, and also accompanying the soloists at the piano. Around this time, he also began to try his hand at composing, mostly marches for the army. One was called the Sunshine March, and it went like this. Yes, of course. Many years later, that was to become the basis of Here's to the Next Time. Henry always gave credit to his Salvation Army training for teaching him the rudiments of orchestration, the necessity for discipline and organization, and also the importance of having a smart appearance. He was himself an elegant and impeccably dressed figure throughout his life, and the pride that wearing a uniform can bring. As Henry himself said,
"If the dress is not in harmony, the band can't be in tune."
December 1916, the midpoint of the First World War, found Henry exchanging his Salvation Army uniform for that of a gunner in the Royal Field Artillery. But his musical talents eventually got him transferred to the military band, and more importantly, this involved playing for dances at the officers' mess, his first experience of playing dance music. This in turn led to work with the regiment's concert party, playing popular classical piano solos, and occasionally the concertina. Officially, he became batman to Captain Godfrey Turl, one of the finest actors of the day, whom he accompanied for monologues. All wonderful experience. Demobbed in February 1919, an unenthusiastic Henry became a clerk in the Ministry of Pensions. His spare time was spent watching the great music hall artists of the day, many of whom were to become his friends and colleagues in later years. He also played occasional solos in weekend concerts, at half a guinea a time, and eventually the chance of a whole week at the Palace Theatre, Salisbury, inspired him to bid goodbye forever to the civil service and take a chance on a show business career. With 2 friends, he formed an act called, with startling unoriginality, the Variety 3. A few weeks of touring at the bottom of the bill convinced him that this was not the way to success, and his next venture was as a silent picture pianist in Tooting. Hearing a performance by concert pianist Harriet Cohen also inspired him to go back to studying at the Guildhall School of Music. In 1922, Henry Hall was about to take his first major step on the road to fame, though what he did seemed to be, on the face of things, foolish. Bored and restless, he threw up his job at the cinema to take a 2-week engagement over Christmas as relief pianist in the dance band at the Midland Hotel, Manchester. As Henry later put it,
"So I walked, without knowing it, into the golden age of the dance band, and an era of popular music which was to serve me and others so very well for the next quarter of a century.
Henry enjoyed his work at the Midland Hotel, but it was not his playing with the band that brought opportunity knocking at his door. On New Year's Eve, the hotel held a special dance, among the guests being Arthur Towell, the managing director. The entertainment also featured a cabaret given by a pair of exhibition dancers, and the lady dancer needed 1 minute in which to change her dress between the waltz and the quick-step. The band's musical director whispered to Henry, "Play something, quick." He did, a Chopin study, The Butterfly, and stopped the show for the first time. Arthur Towell was impressed and promptly gave Henry a permanent booking. By early 1923, he was leading the band, and before long it had become Henry Hall and his Trafford Band, taking its name from the restaurant in the hotel where it worked. Henry had also taken over the Straight Orchestra in the hotel's winter gardens. The six-piece Trafford Band played for tea dances from 4 to 6 in the afternoon, and then from 8 until midnight. It was a happy Henry who, in the late summer of 1923, set off for 2 weeks' holiday in Torquay. During that holiday, he met a young lady named Marjorie, and, to quote Henry again,
"The best bit of work I ever did was the fastest. Meeting on Wednesday, proposal on Friday, engaged to be married on Saturday."
Henry and Marjorie were married at St. George's, Hanover Square in January 1924, 4 months after their first meeting, a happy union that would produce a daughter, Betty, and a son, Mike. Coincidentally, he was appointed as musical director of the Adelphi Hotel, Liverpool, in addition to his existing Manchester commitments. In early 1924, Arthur Towell became controller of the newly amalgamated LMS hotel chain and concentrated on finishing the luxurious Gleneagles Hotel in Perthshire, which was intended to be the showplace of the new organisation. Naturally, Henry was called upon to provide the music and decided on forming a new band for the Midland and transferring his existing band to the Gleneagles. He also came up with an idea that was to have very far-reaching results. It had to do with broadcasting, still in its infancy but rapidly growing into a sturdy child. The British Broadcasting Company had been established in London in 1922 and by now had a station in Glasgow. Henry suggested that a broadcast from the new hotel on its opening night would be an excellent way of not merely publicising the event, but demonstrating the power of this relatively new medium. Both Towell and the BBC went for the idea in a big way, and so it came about that on the evening of June the 4th, 1924, Henry Hall was on the air for the first time. The assistant manager of the Gleneagles Hotel was Charles Arnold.
A day or so before the broadcast, the engineers arrived, and I remember the job they had trying to get a balanced sound. You see, they only used one microphone in those days, and you either heard the drums, or the violins, or the saxophones, but seldom all together. I think they slung the mic from the ceiling eventually. But none of the listeners worried about balance. They were pleased to hear anything on the old cat's whiskers. But we all took the broadcast very seriously at the Gleneagles Hotel. A wireless set was laid on for the directors in a special listening room, the broadcast itself being from the Sun Lounge. As the time for the transmission approached, we were all het up, especially Henry. He was tremendously enthusiastic, but very shy. He used to like to play with the band and conduct from the piano. And one of my difficulties was to get him out in front with his baton. But now he'd got to get in front and announce the numbers in a voice that would reach the microphone. Well, he did it, and I don't think he ever looked back. But I myself didn't really appreciate the significance of that first broadcast of his until a day or so later, when letters started coming in from listeners scattered all over the country. That was when I began to see the shape of things to come, the power of the radio.
So, what did listeners hear over their cat's whisker sets? Well, it would have been something like this, one of Henry's first records made in Manchester in 1924, Dear One. Not very inspiring, perhaps, but there were better things to come. Over the next few years, Henry continued to broadcast from the Gleneagles and also to add to the number of bands under his control until they eventually totalled an amazing 32. Bradford, Birmingham, Glasgow, Leeds, and dozens of other cities where there were LMS hotels featured bands that were supervised by Henry Hall. In 1931, he signed a new recording contract with Decca, and one of his first sides was this rather jazzy number, which features trumpeter Eddie Cromer, I Lost My Gal from Memphis. A year later, Henry Hall recorded a song that he had written back in 1929.
This is Henry Hall speaking to you. We are now going to play you Come Ye Back to Bonnie Scotland, which is the signature tune of the Gleneagles Hotel Band.
That was recorded on the 10th of January 1932. On the 8th of February, Henry received a telegram that was to lead on to the next great development in his career. It came from the BBC and invited him to a meeting at their Savoy Hill headquarters the next morning. On arrival, he learned that Jack Payne, who had led the BBC's resident dance band since 1928, was leaving, and that it was proposed to form an official BBC dance orchestra, with Henry as director. It was a big step for Henry to take, to give up an organisation that he had built over 10 years for a new and initially less lucrative post. But he had always believed in the power of radio, and by 7:15 that evening, his signature was on the contract. The BBC wanted a contrast to Payne's jazzy, brassy sound, and had decided on a combination that used only one trumpet and one trombone, plus the conventional 4 reeds, 2 violins, piano, guitar, bass and drums. They also wanted an oboe to add some unusual tone colours. Henry was less than convinced that this lineup was ideal, but for the moment he went along with it. Over the next few weeks, auditions were held, arrangements were made, and at 8:02 on the 15th of March 1932, the first sound to be transmitted from the BBC's new headquarters, Broadcasting House, Portland Place, London West 1, was the voice of Henry Hall saying, "Hello, everyone. This is Henry Hall speaking." Cyril Stapleton, later to be a famous band leader in his own right, recalls,
8 o'clock came along and nothing happened. The preceding programme overran by 2 minutes, and all that time the red light was flashing on and off. And then not only was this our first broadcast, but it was the first broadcast from Broadcasting House. You can imagine you could have cut the tension with a knife. Then suddenly the light was steady and It's Just the Time for Dancing was on the air for the first time.
Silence, please. National programme from London. Now you're going to hear the first performance of the new BBC Dance Orchestra, directed by Henry Hall.
It's just the time for dancing. Tomorrow is today. Go where the music's calling and dance the blues away. The world that lies before you is one big dancing floor, and all you need to ask for is just one dance more.
You are hearing the signature tune of the BBC Dance Orchestra. The tune is called It's Just a Time for Dancing. This is Button Gillis, who is the first saxophone and the heavyweight of the band. This is Richard Matthews, who is our oboe player and the mascot of the band. He's the youngest player in the BBC.
Not everyone was pleased with the new orchestra. It was criticised for sounding thin and anemic, and many listeners made unfavourable comparisons with predecessor Jack Payne. BBC policy also caused problems. Because the orchestra's regular broadcasting time was at 5:15 in the afternoon, they had to play only material considered suitable for a family audience. Nothing too sophisticated or jazzy. That was left for the West End dance bands broadcasting late in the evening, direct from various nightclubs. Lots of old-fashioned sentiment and comedy, and something for the kiddies. But Henry persevered, and how well he succeeded you may judge from this little reminder of a few of his early hits. First Val Rosing sings,
The sun has got his hat on, hip 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 hooray. The sun has got his hat on and he's coming out today. Now we'll all be happy, hip 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 hooray. The sun has got his hat on and he's coming out.
Next comes Len Berman with Leave the Pretty Gals Alone.
Met a little girl in London, curly hair and eyes of blue. Just listen while I tell my story and show you what a girl will do. She wanted me to spend my money to buy a pretty diamond stone. I put it on her hand on Sunday, and Monday morning she was gone. Then I met a girl in Soho, thought that she was on the square. Don't know where she went from Soho, but anyhow I paid the fare. I thought she was a shy young maiden, because her cheeks were always red. But when I went to find my wallet, I found that I was shy instead.
Something a bit more dainty with Canadian crooner Les Allen. Butterflies in the Rain.
When the rain is pattering helter-skelter, and the butterflies are caught out in the rain, leafy hollyhocks will murmur, come and shelter, until the rainbow shines again. In the heart of every rose a haven, from the pitter-pat refrain. There's protection from the showers in the sympathetic flowers for the butterflies in the rain.
And finally, Leslie Saroni comes along as a guest to sing his own comedy number, Wheezy-Anna.
Wheezy-Anna, Wheezy-Anna, down where the watermelons grow.
Melons wet glorious so.
Wheezy-Anna, Wheezy-Anna, she's the grandest girl I know.
Who's got teeth that are so bright?
Wheezy-Anna,
Like the stars come out at night.
Wheezy-Anna,
Who's conceited, boy, and how?
Wheezy-Anna,
When it thunders, takes a bow.
Wheezy-Anna.
Who's the fattest girl in town?
Wheezy-Anna,
Who's the female Teddy Brown?
Wheezy-Anna,
When she tries to phone, they say,
Wheezy-Anna,
always presses button A.
Wheezy-Anna. Louisiana,
Anna,
Louisiana,
Anna,
down where the watermelons grow.
All the flies gate on then.
Louisiana,
Anna,
Louisiana, she's the grandest girl I know.
who's tattooed upon her back
Louisiana,
stars and stripes and Union Jack,
Louisiana,
snakes and things upon her vest.
Louisiana,
Close your eyes and guess the rest.
Louisiana, 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 down where the watermelons grow.
Like a great big football.
Louisiana, Louisiana, she's the grandest girl I know.
On August the 29th, 1933, the BBC Dance Orchestra, led by Henry Hall, made its first public appearance. The occasion was the radio exhibition at Olympia, and the first thing the audience saw was a silhouetted back view of Henry, baton raised, standing on a glass platform lit from inside, conducting. On the last note of the signature tune, the lights went up to reveal the orchestra.
Rah, 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 BBC Dance Orchestra.
Following his success at Radio Olympia, Henry paid his first visit to the USA to see what tips he could pick up from American bands. Back in Britain, with 9 programs a week to fill, he was trying to think of a way to mark the orchestra's 2nd anniversary whilst making some records one day, including Underneath the Arches with the fast-rising comedy team of Flanagan and Allen. He had an idea, one of the best of his whole career.
We were in the big recording studios in Abbey Road, and they have a lot of companies that record there. Different artists would play. It was while we were having the tea break that there were a whole packet of artists in the room. I knew them all very well. And I looked around, and there was the 2 sisters, Elsie and Doris Waters, Kurt and Daisy, who were personal friends of mine, and Flanagan and Allen. They'd got a new song called Underneath the Arches, and we recorded it for them. And we were having this cup of tea, and I said, why don't we stick this on the air tonight, you know, for a change? And I'll call it a guest night, and you come in, and I won't pay you any money, but if you'd like to come along and broadcast, I'd be delighted to arrange it. And I said to Elsie and Doris, is that all right by you? And they said, fine.
I remember there was quite a crowd in the recording studios that day, wasn't there, Elsie?
Yes, there were Lupino Lane and June.
I think it was when we were having a cup of tea in the canteen that Henry came over and said to us, I wonder if you'd join in a little party on the air tonight.
Yes, and being Henry, of course, he said, would you mind?
That's right. Well, we told him we were playing the Holborn Empire, but he said there wouldn't be any rehearsal. We could just walk into the studio, do our stuff, and get straight back.
So we said we'd do it. And all the others did too, didn't they?
Yes, and later in the day, he asked to own a win-along.
Yes, Henry got his party all right. I believe Flanagan and Allen turned up at Broadcasting House in a stagecoach.
And we turned up in our stage maker. Elsie, can you remember what we said when Henry introduced us at the mic?
Oh, yes, we just went into some Gert and Daisy nonsense.
I don't know, I can't remember really. I think I asked you if you'd told Henry you were taking piano lessons, and you said no. You didn't want to upset him because he came from a musical family.
That's right. His uncle played a long stringed instrument.
It was a bell ringer.
Oh, stop it.
Well, it was something like that. Henry laughed anyway, but then he's always been enthusiastic and just as pleased as if he was in the audience. And he's always pulled just that little bit extra out of you.
You can't help doing your best. He's kind, fair, and absolutely straight, and he's always had time for everyone.
Yes. Whoever you are, he gives you his utmost attention.
And he makes you feel he's delighted to have you with him. He's never changed, has he, Doris?
No, never. And when we dropped into the studio for the broadcast that night in 1934, we never dreamed that we were in at the beginning of something that was to continue through a great war and on into a very different world of the future.
No, but we are very proud to have been in Henry's very first guest night.
And as a memento of that occasion, here is the record that Henry was making that day. Underneath the Arches with Flanagan and Allen.
Underneath the arches, we dream our dreams of bum-bum-ba-da-be-do. Underneath the bum-bum-ba-di-da-bo, on cobblestones we bum-bum-ba-ba-bo. Back to back with body-ba-ba-ba-ba-di-do. Tired out and bum-ba-da-ba-ba-di-do. Sorry when the daylight comes creeping, herald in the dawn, sleeping when it's raining, and sleeping when it's fine. Trains rattling by, pavement is up here alone, without a sheet we lay. Underneath the arches, we dream our dreams away.
Henry Hall's guest nights were to run on and on for over a quarter of a century. In the meantime, he and the orchestra were honoured by being asked to appear in the Royal Command performance at the London Palladium on May the 8th, 1934. Their success was such that they were promptly booked to headline the Palladium show for the week commencing 30th of July 1934, the first of Henry's countless appearances in variety. Second on the bill was singing star Elizabeth Welsh.
I was having a holiday down in Cannes in the south of France, and a telegram came, would I get back to London because Henry Hall was opening at the Palladium. And I was thrilled, but I was livid because I was cutting off my holiday. But however, I got on the train. We had trains in those days. And I got back, and he asked me to sing 2 songs. And we went on, and it was his first appearance in variety, you know. And the audience were absolutely splendid. Packed houses, of course, you see. And he was following the big bands like Ellington, who came over here at the Holborn and the Palladium, and Cab Calloway, you see. And, of course, there was our Henry Hall from the BBC, you see, hitting them bang, bang, like those wonderful bands. And he was so thrilled, you know. He was like a child, just enjoying it, you know.
By this time, the oboe had gone, and Henry now had 2 trumpets and 2 trombones. The improvement was noticeable. Here are 2 more reminders of Henry Hall hits. First, Kitty Masters sings, "Little Man, You've Had a Busy Day."
Little man, you're crying, I know why you're blue. Someone took your kitty car away. Time to go to sleep now, little man, you've had a busy day. Johnny won your marbles, tell you what we'll do. Dad'll get some new ones right away. Time to go to sleep now, Little man, you've had a busy day. You've been playing soldiers, the battle has been won. The enemy is out of sight. Come along there, soldier, put away your gun. The war is over for tonight. Time to stop your scheming, time your day was through. Can't you hear the bugles softly say? Time you should be dreaming, little man, you've had a busy day.
And here is Les Allen with
Oh, play to me, gypsy, the moon's high above. Oh, play me your serenade, the song I love. Oh, sing to me, gypsy, and when you are gone, your song will be haunting me and lingering on. Beside your caravan, the campfire's bright, I'll be a vagabond just for tonight. Oh, play to me, gypsy, the moon's high above. Oh, play me your serenade, the song I love.
During his years as a band leader, Henry hadn't been neglecting his composing. Listen now to a brief medley of a few of his songs.
Oh, Joanna, I like you for your manner. I like you for your eyes of dreamy blue. Oh, Joanna, don't be a hard-boiled Hannah, but join me in a little Bill and Coo. Do. Oh, Joanna, although I've not a tanner, the heart that beats for you is good and true. Oh, Joanna, I should like to shout Hosanna. Joanna, Alana, you'll do. It's time to say goodnight, and it's time to close your eyes. Let's put out the light till the dawn breaks through the sky. A stirring time, a whirring time, a record time for Father Time. The daily times that Big Ben chimes are radio time.
He also wrote the score for his next venture, a film, Music Hath Charms, built round the idea of Henry wondering on his birthday just what effect his music has on people listening to his broadcasts. One critic said,
"This quiet, aloof, retiring man has blossomed out as a star by being himself."
Love came along and gave me a song to open your heart to me. Love knew that soon our two hearts in tune would take up its melody. Love must have seen what music could mean to young hearts in harmony. For love had foretold that one day I'd hold the proof in my arms that music hath charms.
Music Hath Charms, sung by long-serving Henry Hall vocalist Dan Donovan. Next, Henry was invited to go as guest conductor on the maiden voyage of Britain's new pride of the ocean, the RMS Queen Mary.
At the London terminus, passengers took train for Southampton to embark upon the most memorable voyage in the history of Britain's merchant navy. For after many years of preparation, after the finest brains and labour in the shipbuilding world have brought to perfection the £4,800,000 ocean wonder, the great day has arrived for the maiden voyage of the Queen Mary. bound for New York and the blue ribbon of the Atlantic. Good luck to Queen Mary.
He wrote a song for that, too.
Somewhere at sea, a liner is somewhere at sea, bringing to me a traveler who will build my life anew. He's out on the sea, sailing to me. When shall I see my lover come home from the sea? Hurry to me, great liner, for you can make my dream come true. Wherever you be, answer my plea, somewhere at sea.
While Henry was off on the high seas, the orchestra continued its broadcasts with sound-alike announcer George Hodigan. Newspapers pointed out the deception, and on his return, Henry opened his first programme with, "This is Henry Hall speaking," and a trademark was born. Henry liked jazz far more than most listeners would have suspected from his programmes. He was very proud of the fact that in 1936 he employed the great black American Benny Carter to arrange for his orchestra. The Musicians' Union rules prevented him from playing his alto or trumpet. Drummer and vocalist George Elric, also to become famous in his own right, got his first real break with Henry, and this version of The Music Goes Round and Round was one of the big hits of the year.
One night while playing in the band, a girl came up, she said, "You're grand." So I replied in words low down, "Now this is how the music goes round." I blow through here, the music goes round and around, whoa, and it comes up here. I push the first valve down, the music goes down and around, whoa, and it comes up here. I push the middle valve down, the music goes down around, below, 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 diddly-ho-ho-ho, listen to the notes come out. I push the other valve down, the music goes round and around, whoa, and it comes out here.
In March 1937, the BBC published a statement.
The BBC announces that at Mr. Henry Hall's wish, his engagement as director of the BBC Dance Orchestra will cease on September 25th next. In consequence, the orchestra itself will be discontinued from that date and will not be replaced. The corporation is pleased to be able to add that Mr. Hall's connections with broadcasting will not be severed, as arrangements are being made for him to broadcast frequently whenever his other engagements permit.
Henry officially severed his connection with the BBC Dance Orchestra with a special broadcast from 10:40 to midnight. The first half, Memory Time, was a selection of favourite numbers from the past 5 years, followed by a souvenir guest night with Fred Astaire, Richard Tauber, the Mills Brothers, Jack Buchanan, Oliver Wakefield, Noel Coward, and, to finish the show, the one and only Gracie Fields singing "You've Got to Smile When You Say Goodbye."
You've got to smile when you say goodbye. You've got to smile as the days go by. And all the time that you're away, I'm thinking of you. I'll write an got to smile when you say goodbye. You've got to smile till the clouds roll by. So till we meet again, say cheerio and then give me a smile when you say goodbye.
A mere 2 days later, on the 27th of September 1937, Henry Hall and his orchestra opened in Variety at the Hippodrome Theatre, Birmingham. Henry appeared from behind the curtains and said, "Hello, everyone. This is Henry Hall speaking. May I present the orchestra?" And as the curtains parted, they struck up with Under the Double Eagle. One of the hits of the tour was the singing of Bob Mallin, who specialized in cowboy songs.
There's silver on the stage tonight, sprinkled by the moon above. So lie down, doggies, and let me dream of the one gal I love. There's silver on the stage tonight. We've been on the trail all day. So lie down, doggies, and you dream too of the range far away, of the range waiting for you, where the streams never go dry, and the grass sparkles with dewdrops in the meadows of the sweet by and by. There's silver on the sage tonight, sprinkled by the moon above. So lie down, doggies, and let me dream of the one I love.
To handle the ballads, he had Leslie Douglas.
You took the words right out of my heart, and it was like a bolt from the blue. You took the words right out of my heart when you said I love you. When you said I love you, I stood in a daze a while. But I felt that way too from the moment I saw you smile. I had the words and you in my heart. There wasn't room enough for the two. You took the words right out of my heart and left only room for you.
There just isn't time to do more than mention Anita Riddell, the three sisters, Elizabeth Scott, Bert Yarlett, Bernard Hunter, Molly Morell, and all the others who helped in the vocal department. In February 1939, the orchestra toured Germany and Denmark to great acclaim, and when the Second World War started later that year, Henry came in for some criticism as a result of this. But he wasn't a politician, and along with millions of others, he had believed Mr. Neville Chamberlain's prediction of peace in our time. When the war did start and theatres were closed, touring seemed to be impossible. Henry took a lease on the Colston Hall, Bristol, for use as a base where he could give shows. The BBC told him that lack of studio space would make it difficult to arrange any further broadcasts for the orchestra or for guest night. But fate played into Henry's hands. The BBC evacuated their variety department to Bristol. They wanted to use the Colston Hall, and so guest night returned to the air every Thursday evening at 8:30 from December 1939. In the spring of 1940, Henry and the orchestra were back on the road, and each week guest night went out from somewhere in England. It was now that Henry first engaged a young singer named Betty Driver. Yes, the same lady who can be seen today in Coronation Street. She had a particularly big success with a song called The Sailor with the Navy Blue Eyes.
I joined Henry Hall. I deputised for someone at a very big charity concert in Cheltenham. And I can't remember the singer that was on, and I'd never met Henry Hall before. And I went to this concert, and it was a great success. And it was from there that he asked me to join the band. I wasn't just what they used to loosely call a crooner. I used to do like an act in it, 3 or 4 numbers at the end of the band show. And I joined him in 1941, and it was absolutely magical. I think it was the loveliest time of my whole life. I worked all over Britain. And then, of course, every year we used to have to do about 6 weeks a year for ENSA, for the troops, when the war was around, you see. And we went to France, Belgium, Holland, Germany, and all around there with the band. And, oh, it was marvellous. And we go on to submarines and do all that kind of thing and do guest nights. And I'm terrified of submarines. I can't bear the thought. And I made them promise that they wouldn't let it go underneath. I said, just keep it in the dock, won't you? Don't let it float anywhere. And we did this huge concert there. And naturally, of course, The Sailor with the Navy Blue Eyes. Oh, it's marvellous.
Now, who's got girls in every port, hanging around like flies? Oh, the sailor with the navy blue eyes. Now who's the guy they love to buy dozens of socks and ties? Oh, the sailor with the navy blue eyes. When the boat comes home after crossing the foam, he's still at sea, thinking, wondering, who's it gonna take, rowing on the lake? Who's the yob? Who's got the job, waving the most goodbyes? Oh, the sailor with the navy blue eyes.
I had a very bad nervous breakdown, and between Henry and my sister, they got me back to work. And Henry said to my sister, he said, we're at Nottingham Empire next week. He said, I want you to bring Betty over and let her stand on the side of the stage and just listen to the band. And so I went. I was terrified. I hadn't been out of the house for about 18 months. I was so ill. And I went and stood on the side of the stage, and this sound was gorgeous, this big band sound. And I stood there listening to them, and of course tears rolling off my chin end. And then all of a sudden, I heard my name mentioned on stage, and I thought, oh my God, what on earth is that? Anyway, my sister gave me a little push, and I shot onto the stage, and Henry took hold of me and he said, hello, my love, come on, he said, you stand with me while we play this song of yours. And he was tone deaf, Henry, he couldn't sing a note, he was terrible. And he played one of my old songs, and he ignored the audience completely and just stood facing me on the stage at the microphone, and he said, I'll start to sing it a little bit, and you join me as well. He said, doesn't matter about anybody else, just me and you, let's sing it. And he started to sing, and the lovely pianist and the band all started to play in my key. And eventually I started to join him, singing it very quietly, and then he left off. And I carried on. I've never been off since.
In 1947, Henry made a big decision. He was going to give up touring in variety and become an impresario, presenting his own shows, ranging from revues to straight plays. Something in the Air at the Grand, Blackpool, was his first production, and he appeared in it himself alongside comedian Ted Ray. Inevitably, when the Blackpool run ended, it toured. In November 1948, Henry once again appeared in the Royal Command performance, conducting for the finale, not only his own orchestra, but the combined Ted Heath's band, George Melocrino's orchestra, and the Skyrockets plus the Luton Girls' Choir. Of course, guest night was still going strong. Who could forget Beryl Reid and Monica?
I don't think I've ever met anyone quite as naughty as you.
As the art mistress said to the gardener.
You know what I mean. Look at all this mess you've been making this afternoon.
Well, I was only helping the lady who made the trifles. She gave me a huge great bowl of custard and said, make sure it goes round. I did. I threw it into an electric fan. Oh, what a super foggy slosh.
Bob Monkhouse is another famous name who has good reason to be grateful to Henry and guest night.
As I recall, my first meeting with Henry Hall was on Henry Hall's guest night. For a young comedian, it was a tremendous opportunity because usually only established stars appeared on it. I remember very distinctly being very nervous. So to actually see him coming over towards me, I knew it was to speak to the producer. And then to my astonishment, he reached out his hand and shook my hand and said, "Welcome to the program. You're going to be a great success." And I was open-mouthed. I was gaping at him. He knew how nervous I was and how impressed I was. But that courtliness, that air of always being a kind and thoughtful gentleman was there through all my experience of Henry Hall in subsequent years, but that first meeting seemed to sum it all up. And then, just before the show, I was standing backstage. Henry must have come up behind me because I said out loud, "My God, I'm going to die out there alone." And he said, "You've got 3 things wrong there. Don't call me my God, call me Henry. You're not going to die, you're going to live. And you're not going out there alone, you're going out with Johnny Walker." And he poured me a stiff scotch.
Probably the biggest success of Henry's career as an impresario was Irma la Douce, starring Elizabeth Seal.
I'd heard about a show called Irma la Douce that was on in Paris at the time at the Theatre Grammont. And every management was trying to find out who had the English rights on it, because they wanted to do it in London. It was obviously a super thing to do. And nobody could find out who had the English rights. As the story, I think, was told to me, is that one day Henry Hall walked into Binky Beaumont's office, and Binky apparently had also been trying to get hold of the rights. And Henry said, "Oh, Binky, here you are, Irma la Douce, would you like to produce it?" And then their association started, and Henry Hall had very quietly been, just hanging on to these things until he was ready to give the thing to whomever he chose.
My tongue gets tied. Because you're by my side. If you give me a squeeze, I like birds and the bees. I go weak at the knees.
Henry Hall's guest night finally came to an end on the 3rd of May 1957. But Henry was already into television, with a monthly series entitled Face the Music, subtitled Henry Hall Recalls People and Events, Melodies and Songs in His 30 Years in the World of Entertainment. It ran happily for several seasons. In the 60s, Henry was slowing down on his activities. I first met him when I visited his office in Steinway Hall to discuss an album of his BBC Dance Orchestra recordings that I was planning to issue on LP. He was immensely courteous and helpful, though he seemed doubtful whether the public would be interested. In the event, that album turned out to be only the first of several. By the 70s, he was a widower and living in Eastbourne. A stroke had impaired his mobility, but his spirits remained high. Betty Driver remained in touch with him almost to the end.
I had this awful feeling one day. I sat having my breakfast at home before I came to work, and I said to my sister, I've got to talk to Henry Hall. She said, you only wrote. I used to write about every 4 weeks. You only wrote a little while ago. I said, I don't care, I've got to speak to him. And thank God I did. I've never been so grateful in my life. And then, of course, it was a terrible shock when I knew that he died.
And so, here we are, back outside the Devonshire Park Theatre in Eastbourne, where Henry Hall spent so many years in peaceful retirement. At the start of our story, I told you about the concert that was held here last year to mark Henry's 90th birthday. At the end of the show, a spotlight was thrown on the box where he was sitting. And now, I'd like you to hear what happened when I said,
Ladies and gentlemen, Henry Hall.